In this video, I'm going to give you a bit of an in-depth look at our soil probe report. There's a lot of information on these reports, and they're broken up into two sections. The top section is a dashboard, which contains obviously summary information for the probe, and underneath that we've got all the charts for the probes. So I'm going to start off in the dashboard. Now this particular probe has completed its season, so you'll see here that we have an end date, and you'll also see that it's no longer active. Now these two things affect various features of this report, which I'll go over as we go through it. So starting at the top we have our location details, which is obviously our location details. We've got the crop type, which is cotton, the fact that it's inactive, and when the last reading was. Then we've got our rainfall data, which for inactive probes is relative to that last reading. Then we've got our irrigation details. Now, first of all, there is the default usage, and you can change that to whatever you want and save that. And then there's the current usage, and we calculate that based on what's actually being used by the crop from the soil total. Using these two figures, we can calculate these two figures. So the irrigation date default is when we figure you'll hit the refill point based on this default usage. The irrigation date current is the date you'll hit the refill point based on the current usage. Next we have our irrigation limits, and you can set these to whatever you want. So we've got our full point, our refill point, and then we've got a gauge which gives you an idea of where you're at the moment. So you can see here the soil total is currently 247. Now to change your full point and refill point, you can use your up and down arrow, or we can set it to the current soil total. So I can click on this and it sets that to 247, and then I would save that. Next we have our crop details. Now like I said, this is a probe that's in a field that's finished the season, so we have both a planting date and an end date. Now I've also put in here the price per bale and yield per hectare. Using all this information, we can calculate this crop summary. So first of all, we've got our plant date, end date, full point and refill points. Then we've got some ATC rain and date agree data. Now our ATC data comes from our GoSat field which we assign to this probe. So we basically map out the field on an image, and we use that to collect satellite imagery and figures based on satellite imagery for calculating ETC. So remembering that these figures are all based on our planting date and end date, we have a ETC water usage of 1031 millimeters per hectare, a rain total of 182 millimeters, and a total day degrees of 2,601 day degrees, which comes from our assigned weather station. Next we've got our heat shock days, cold shock days, air temp max and min, again from the assigned weather station, and we'll have a look at that again later on, but that's basically coming from this data here. And lastly, on the dashboard we've got our water use efficiency data. So based on the information you've entered up here, we've got a ETC water use efficiency of 2.97 kilograms per millimeter of water, 1.3 bales per megalitre, and $6.1 per millimeter. So that's the dashboard. Let's go down and have a look at some of the graphs. Now first of all, you can see we've got our soil total plotting out here. We've got our irrigate events going on, and then water usage and irrigate event. We've got our full point and refill point, and we can also use these buttons up here. The first button, show daily water usage, does just that. Basically it'll show on the graph the daily water use for each day, and that's what those numbers represent there. What I can also do is keep notes for this probe. So it's just a text box, and you can type whatever you want, and you can save that, and you can keep a list of freehand notes for yourself in there. Now these irrigate dates, the first one is based on ATC forecast data. Now because this is a crop that has an end date, we don't plot forecast data on it. So we haven't got that one, but what it would do is plot the predicted irrigate date based on the ATC forecast water use. And then we've got our standard irrigate dates based on our default usage, which we enter above, and the current usage, which we calculate for you. The last thing we have here is our print summary report, and this will actually print the entire report for you and save it as a PDF. Underneath that, we've got our rainfall chart. And again, if this was an active probe, we would have over on the right here our 10-day forecast for rain. Next we have our ATC graph. Now this is, like I said, coming from our GoSat field. And we've got a couple of different sets of data going on here. First of all, we have our ATC values. Now these figures come from calculations based on the field, and they're calculated as imagery comes in. We also have a cumulative line for our predicted water use for our ATC figures on top there. Another thing we can do here is plot satellite images. Now these two figures are actually independent, so the ETC figure in red here that we're plotting aren't coming from the images that we are about to display. The ETC figures that are plotted on the graph come from corrected imagery, so it takes into consideration things like clouds and so on. The images that you're about to see plotted are actually just raw images brought down from Google. So let's have a look at one. You just click on the image button there, and it's going off to Google and bringing down an image for our field. Now it's got a couple of potential sources. It can get it from the Sentinel satellite, which is our preference, and we try and get it from there if we can. But if we can't get it from there, we get it from Landsat 7 or Landsat 8. So it's come back and it's telling us here we've got a Sentinel image, and it's basically covering the field that we've mapped out, showing you the ETC, sorry, this is our NDVI figure or graph of our field. And this legend here will give you an idea of what that colour represents. We can also plot on here our KC values, our NDRE values, which is only available on Sentinel, it's not available on the Landsat satellites. And we can also plot the actual field. So this is a raw image of the field. The next chart we have deals with temperature. So going along here, we've got our maximum temperature for the day in green, our minimum temperature for the day, the orange, and our cumulative day degrees in red. Also, up top here in these little red circles, they represent heat shock days, and the blue circles represent cold shock days. And the total number of those will be displayed here in the heading. So for this period, we've got 60 heat shock days and 31 cold shock days. Also on this graph, we've got lines that represent the various stages for the crop. And these are given to you up here. So we've got finished flowering, we've got peak flowering, open bowl, and so on. And that's what these dotted lines are. In fact, we can just have a look at them. We'll just have a get rid of that particular graph and we can just see them. So here's our different stages and the day degree line passing through those stages for that crop. I can also, if I want, just show temperature, so I can get rid of that stages and just plot that. Our last graph here is our soil moisture profile, and this is our lines or moistures at our various depths over time. We could, if we wanted to, also plot temperature if our sensors were collecting temperature information. So that's our soil probe report for a field that has a planting date and end date.